and see if other folks have questions as well. But we just really want to thank you for joining us. Know how crazy busy it is during election season. So just to start, Nikki, could you just take 3 minutes, kind of introduce yourself? What is your number one priority and what you will take to achieve it? I'll
Yeah.
let you know when you have about 30 seconds left.
Okay. Yes, I'm Nicole Evans Jones, also known as Nikki. And I'm to put neighborhoods first, basically. I am a retired educator, a small business owner, a mom, a daughter, a grandmother. And so my top three priorities are transportation, safety, and housing. And how I plan to do that work is by listening to you guys, right? I think that my experience in the education space, like I said, for over 30 years, working in different neighborhoods throughout the city, I've found that neighborhoods have the best formulas to getting to the end results, right? Safety is a priority to everyone, but what that looks like, how that works is unique to every neighborhood. So that is my spill, probably 45 seconds. I'm trying to keep us, on task, but I'm open to answering any questions after this. Yep.
Well, thanks for joining us. Ishay, your turn at that question.
Great, great. Thank you. And thank you all so much for joining us this evening. I am Ishay Collins, honored to be running for the open seat on Atlanta City Council Post 3. I too myself as an Atlanta native, I grew up born and raised here as well. I start off with, I'm a Crawford Long baby. I grew up in the East Atlanta area. My mother retired many years ago, but a working class woman that, was raising her single parent, raising her 4 children and two relatives, and just wanting the best for us in the city that we love. And so I went to school here. I graduated from Druid Hills High School, went to Spelman College. I am a civil rights attorney full-time. And also I sit on the Atlanta Board of Education, where I just rolled off as chair of the board. I've been on the school board for the last 11 years, and for the last 6 years I served as chair and vice chair, and have really been at the table to really move some groundwork and systems to really move our education ecosystem forward for our children and our families. And so I knew that took community engagement. I knew that took advocacy, but more importantly, I knew it took courageous leadership for the community to know they had a leader at the table to ensure that our voices was heard, our communities were represented, and more importantly, that we were truly solving issues and really moving forward for the betterment of all of us. And so for me, my priorities is continuing to fight for a city that thrives for all of us, ensuring that our city is affordable for all of us to live. So that's ensuring that we are investing in our affordable housing inventory, also making sure that we are funding our affordable housing funds to protect our legacy residents and also our growing families in the city. Also, I am fighting to ensure that we have safe and healthy neighborhoods that reflects the diversity of our neighborhoods throughout the city. And so that is ensuring that we are looking at community safety and alternatives that truly reflect our community, but also leaning into some of the key issues that some of our communities struggle with in terms of food insecurity and access. This third part of my platform is fighting for a city where we can all access the things that make Atlanta great. So that's truly leaning into our transit inequity, making sure that we all have access to move freely and mobilely throughout this city. And also looking into our infrastructure systems, fully making sure our repair structures are funded to replace our roads and sidewalks, our water infrastructure that we know that we are currently under 2 federal consent decrees for. And more importantly, for you,
30 seconds left.
Yep. And more importantly, for you to know that you will have a city council representative that's experienced, that's proactive, that's present, one that has been doing the work, and one that has been at the table to ensure that all of our voices are at the table. And like I tell everyone, I'm day one ready. I've been moving the work forward on behalf of our children and our families throughout the city, and I would love to continue to do that as your next Post 3 at-large member.
Thanks, you.
Nathan.
And I hear a lot from both of you related to affordable housing, transportation. That's going to get into our next 2 questions.
Yeah.
Ishay, I'll start with you this time. there's a lot of conversation about the need for more affordable housing, the need to increase housing supply in the city of Atlanta,
Mhm.
and a lot of conversations about the zoning changes and zoning rewrites that are going on currently. I was
Yes.
curious to get your guys' opinion on that. Do you believe that every neighborhood in the city needs to accept additional housing through zoning policies? Or is it okay for some neighborhoods to remain the same and maintain their existing zoning conditions?
Yeah, so I'll start with the need for affordable housing. And so there is this conversation that we have enough, that we have a robust inventory of affordable housing, but truly it goes to affordable for who and affordable for what family structure. And what we see is that we have a lot of affordable housing for single units or small units, but truly leaning into increasing our affordability and our affordable housing inventory to truly support small families, family structures. And what we do know is as Atlanta grows and our population growing, our families are growing. So there is a need for us to have more single family housing available on the affordable, in the affordable space. And we have not done a lot of work in that space. It's growing, but we're not fully there yet when we compare what we are being told what affordable is. In terms of the zoning piece, I definitely think that there is an equitable piece there that we all collectively as a city should embrace with our zoning. And I know that could be a contentious piece for the fact that we have areas in the city where it's a very high density, and we have some areas that are low density, some areas where we're locking in the neighborhood development plan structure, and some that are like, hey, we've had enough. And so I do think that the zoning rewrite, which is taking 40 plus years to be at this space, is necessary for us to truly ensure that we are equitably sharing in terms of the development of this city, and not putting pressure on heavy populous areas, but truly it's spreading out what our zoning and our comprehensive development, and when I say zoning, our comprehensive development plan really should look like. So I do believe that there is an opportunity for us to lead into the equitable space here, and I do think the time is now. We have a great opportunity here.
And just quick follow-up, in terms of like the equitable space. So what I'm hearing is that everyone to some extent needs to probably accept some level of changes in order to produce the housing that we need.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's, and I think it's not so much as so that we have to force this change. The conversations are happening. I've been at the table over the years. The conversations are happening. The next level is, how do we do it? And so if we truly reset the tone of this conversation and really paint for the entire city throughout on what affordable looks like for your neighborhood and area, I truly feel that we'll get more we will have more buy-in. But this kind of forcible tone that we've set, I do think it has worried some communities. And I do think it's important for you to have leadership that can understand that is open to having those conversations and dialogue, and that are really truly on the ground of ensuring that everyone's voice and feedback is heard to make sure we get it right.
Yeah. Okay, thank you. I appreciate that.
Yeah.
And Nikki, it's that same question for you on affordable housing and housing zoning changes, and whether everyone needs to be, having some of their skin in the spot.
Yeah, I think I touched on this a little bit when I did my brief introduction. I believe that every neighborhood is unique. And I know that as a building leader, right? So everybody wanted their kid to be able to read, but how you got there was different by every community, every neighborhood. I don't care how close they were. So with that said, that's how I came up with putting neighborhoods first. I believe that we don't need to push zoning on anyone or any neighborhood that does not want that particular type of zoning. I believe we have a toolbox for affordable housing, and then we need to look within that affordable housing toolbox and then make decisions about specific neighborhoods. And so that is my initial thoughts. Those are my initial thoughts. And then secondly, I went to the Atlanta Planning Advisory Board meeting Saturday morning, and there was a lot of conversation about Plan A. And from what I understand, they are preparing maps. So you can literally look at your neighborhood, kind of hover over and see what some of the possible changes are, or what the ideas are, what the conversations are, because they're meeting with neighborhoods. And that aligns with what I think, right? And not just what I think, what I've known over the last 30 years is that neighborhoods help to drive what needs to happen at the city level, not the reverse. I'm in Southwest Atlanta right now, where my parents are residents and brought me home from the hospital 57 years ago. They're trying to age in place. They love their single family resident existence, right? However, where I live in West Midtown, I live in a townhome, and some of the houses in my community are single family houses. When my mom comes over, she loves the concept. She was one of those not in my backyard kind of people. But I believe that when we go into neighborhoods where we're a welcome and provide the type of housing that they agree upon and we know is best, others will see how that works. And then they may be more open to it. People are afraid of change. They're afraid of things that look different from what they're used to. And I think the city council and the city of Atlanta has an opportunity to go within this toolbox and make decisions with residents that make sense for neighborhoods. And if we get it right, others will be excited about possibly introducing different types of housing to their neighborhood. But we don't need to push it. That is not what we're here for. We're here to listen to our constituents.
Okay, thank you. And the quote on kind of fear of change leads pretty well into this next question. It's about transportation. I know that's a big hot topic. The joke in Atlanta is Atlanta's an hour from Atlanta. We are a car dependent city. So I just want to hear from both of you what your vision is for transportation in the city. Do we need to do things like build Beltline Rail? Do we need to reduce parking in certain areas? When we're looking at our roadways, do we need to be making more space for buses, bikes, pedestrians?
Yeah.
And if so, how do you respond to communities who might be fearful of some of these changes or don't want some of these changes? And I'll start with you, Nikki.
Yes, yes. So this is my favorite topic. I have said publicly that if given a choice of what committee I would like to be on, it would be the transportation committee. I think everybody has a pothole story in the city of Atlanta. So obviously we need well-preserved roads. But then also we have made this push. We know that we are too car dependent in the city of Atlanta. And we've made this push to ask people to take alternative transit. But the infrastructure, I was coming down, what was I on? MLK coming here. And I looked at the bike lane that went from the far right. It went into the center of the two lanes that were driving south. I guess, no, there's more west. And I was like, I would never come in between these two car lanes on my bicycle. I think we have moved too fast and not been thoughtful enough. I say this all the time as a former principal and working in schools. You have to be very intentional about the things that you rolled out because, you're going to be accountable. Like at carpool in the morning, at carpool in the afternoon. You couldn't make decisions that didn't make sense. And so I think that we need to really focus. I believe that's where the administration so far has been negligent. I get affordable housing was not built for 12 years in the city, so I know that's why that's been a big push. But our transportation infrastructure will make or break what's happening in the city of Atlanta and all the goals that we have. People are not connected by sidewalks. People are not connected by transit. The transit they cannot trust, so they don't take it as an option. So I think the bus rapid transit that's coming through Summerhill, that's exciting. I'd love to have it in the Campbellton corridor and to see it in the Clifton corridor so we can get some of the people out of the cars. I think we have parking spaces that we can convert to housing. I also believe that we need to tax our non-Atlanta residents that are driving into the city and impacting our infrastructure, our roads, and the congestion. And so I'm thinking towards talking about or talking through a parking tax so that we can fund a alternative transit fund, much like the affordable housing fund, so that we can set aside earmarked money for our transportation issues, starting with sidewalks and moving on to protected bike lanes, not just bike lanes, like the one I described today is a bike lane, but it's not protected. So I just think we need to be more intentional and more purposeful. As an experienced building leader, that's all I know to do, is to be responsible, impactful, and make decisions that impact people correctly and not just check a box.
Thank you. Ishay, your turn on transportation.
Yeah. Can you do mind repeating the question, Nathan, so I can just make sure I cover everything?
Yeah. Atlanta is a very car dependent city. So it's kind of curious what your vision for transportation should look like for Atlanta. Do we need to do things like build Beltline Rail, build other MARTA projects, reduce parking? Do we need to kind of reimagine what our roads are and shift space from cars to buses, bikes, pedestrians? And if we are making those changes with people, sometimes being fearful of change or being opposed to change, how do you respond to communities who may not want to have those types of changes?
Yeah. My initial response is, we need all of it, right? I mean, we're in a city, again, we're in a city that is so car dependent, even living in the city ourselves. I think it's extremely important that we must, in fact, prioritize transit and transit access throughout our city. The plan, and we have so many multitudes of different plans. We have to get to a point of actually working our plans. And so when we think about MARTA, what we're seeing with our busted rapid transit projects, and also the extensions and the infill stations, it's extremely important for you. It's extremely important for city leadership to hold MARTA accountable to make sure those projects are being completed and that we're on a solid track of completion. As we all know, that there's this question of the $70 million that has been missing from, the audit that revealed this $70 million gap. I do think it's important for us to lean in to firmly understand where that money is and what is our solution to get that money back, because that also help us fund the projects that are in the tier 1 and tier 2 phases of what we currently know of our MARTA plan that we as voters, as citizens passed in 2016. I do think there is absolutely important for us when we're talking about the comprehensive development plan to ensure that we are making our streets safe, our areas walkable, and that we do in fact extend our sidewalks, our walking trails, and our bike lanes. I know on the east side, where we're seeing some of that construction, and with Moreland and Boulevard and throughout other areas of the city, I do think those projects are priority, because what it does is it forces, and I hate to use the word force, but it invites you to drive your car less. But I do think that there are other areas around the city where we can benefit from that development as well. Where I live in Southwest Atlanta, similar to where Nikki is, I'm over in the Princeton Lakes area. We don't have that level of structure, but we want it. And so it's truly about it's truly about having all communities at the table to not only look at the evidence of what's happening to reduce our congestion and making our city more walkable, but also where are certain communities in terms of the planning and the prioritization to make that happen as well. I do think it's a great opportunity to truly bring communities together, which helps dispel that fear, right, Nathan, where people are like, well, I don't know what that looks like. I don't know how to navigate in this, but we have certain parts of the city where we can show true success and what that looks like. Then others are more likely to be open to those ideas. And so I do think we have to extend our transit, we have to extend our MARTA services for more reliability and also more consistency. We have to lean into our comprehensive development plan, which overlaps with our zoning, and making sure that we are getting the zoning and the development pieces right for our sidewalks and our bike lanes, but also for those areas that
about 30 seconds left.
For those areas that can truly be walkable. and really lean into that space. And I do think your city council and your city leadership, we have the tools in place, we have the plans in place, and we need to lead and truly work the plan.
Thank you for all that. The last question we have before we open up to other people, I'll start with you, Ishay, since you went second this last time, is what do you think are the most pressing challenges facing Southeast Atlanta? There's a lot of people on this call from Southeast Atlanta.
Yeah.
And what actions would you take to address those if elected?
Yeah. I do think it's a couple of, I do think it's a couple of things that as serving as a school board member for the entire part of District 6, which is complete part of the south side of this city and a little bit of Southeast Atlanta. I share that side with my colleague Katie Howard. I do think there's a couple of priority pieces, but I also know that wanting to ensure community voices at the table. We definitely, I think what we talk about transit, the transportation piece and mobility is key. Ensuring that we are truly, in fact, developing and making sure that those projects are a priority to ensure that we are, in fact, leaning into the sidewalks, the bike lanes, and the safe lanes and complete streets that have the complete streets development that has been promised on the on the southeast side. I definitely think there's the need in terms of safety, public safety, and what that looks like for the community in terms of truly having the community voice to ensure the neighborhood is safe. I also feel, and this is one that when being in the space, that there have been a lot of decisions that have been made that impacts the southeast side or the south period where we're not always where we have not been at the table. And so I think there is one where we priority is ensuring that we are a priority in the comprehensive development plan, that it truly reflects what we on the southeast side of this city has truly leaned into or wanting to see in the development of our neighborhoods and our communities. I constantly push back on decisions that have been made of when it appears that there's so much build out and congestion and development throughout every part of the city that things are starting to be that things are moving more south. And I do think that there is opportunity for us to really be at the table and really be very intentional and forward-facing and fearless about what we want to see in the area. So I would definitely say transportation, mobility, safety piece, and truly comprehensive development that reflects the character of the neighborhoods that the community have expressed.
Thank you. And the same question for you, Nikki. What do you think are the most pressing challenges in Southeast Atlanta, and what action would you take if elected to address those?
Yeah, I've had quite a few meetings in Southeast Atlanta. I don't know if everyone on the call knows, but I was principal of Toomer Elementary School in Kirkwood from 2009 to 2015 or 16. And during that time, it was the fastest gentrifying neighborhood in the country. Now, no one on the board told me that, or no one in the education space told me that. It was once I took over the position that I noticed the need for infrastructure, bike lanes, sidewalks that connected everybody. I noticed the need for 911 services. Call 911, you might get DeKalb, you might get Fulton County. So I think there's a lot of needs that are unique to the Southeast community, including transportation, sidewalks, those things that obviously will help neighbors to get point A to point B safely. I think that we also need to look at the housing. As we're going into this 40 years later rezoning process, we need to take into account what neighbors are thinking are viable solutions, right? Many of the housing, I know members of my family that lived in that area 50, 60 years ago, there were duplexes. And some of the houses now, one door is stationary and you enter through the other door, but they were a duplex structure, right? And so I think we need to look at and listen to the community in the areas of housing, in the areas of transportation that makes sense. We need to solve that I won't say century old, but decades old issue of how to get assistance as people age in the neighborhood when there is an emergency. And then I also think we need to look at taxes, school taxes for our residents that are 70 years and older. I think that that is causing a strain on our aging population. That is something that we can have conversations around at the city council, school board kind of level. So those are, I would think, are the biggest things that I have heard from meeting with residents in Kirkwood and Summerhill, and some of the other communities throughout this opportunity to possibly serve the city of Atlanta.
Great. Thank you so much. I'm going to turn it over to Chris to kind of moderate some questions from the audience. And Nick, I think you have to leave pretty soon. Is that right?
I think both of us are
Yes.
expected at
Yeah, I'm a little bit closer.
6:30. Okay, so maybe I have time for one question.
Yeah, so what I'd like to do is just briefly summarize. A couple of people put questions in the chat of kind of the concerns I see evident in the questions. So I think you can hear some common issues that are popping up for neighbors here in Southeast Atlanta. One is about zoning, concern that changes in affordable housing, zoning particularly with areas zoned MRC3 might be being changed with and allowing in lieu payments. There was another question about PAD and what's going on with the city now. I know I've heard this from many people that this is a really serious concern. This is something we should be celebrating in the city of Atlanta, and I think there's a lot of confusion why that's being threatened or changed. And another question about data centers and to what extent both of you are interested in protecting in areas along the Beltline, for example. It seems like, according to one questioner, that Councilman Lewis is looking for an exemption, and I think there's concern about that. And so I would say we're right up to 6:30. Is there anything from what I'm saying now that you just want to quickly address and kind of give each of you maybe just a minute and 30 seconds, and then you hop out and we'll kind of continue any conversation with people that want to stay on after. We'll start with Nikki.
Yes, I was looking in the comments and seeing some of the questions. So the first one I think was around, have we read the Z2482? I have not. I will deduce this may have something to do with the option of builders and developers to say they're going to do affordable housing, but then to take the option to pay out. I'm not sure if that's what this is about. If it is, I know that's just happened with the Gulch development, and I was as shocked as many people were. And I did look into it, and I was told, yes, that is written into most of the contracts. I would like to see this, because I think what happens with that is then if people buy out and then it goes into a fund to build on the west side or what have you, we will end up with a concentration of affordable housing in a specific area of town. And I think that's what we're all trying to avoid. That would be my first thing with that. I think the second question had to do about the third question was the call centers, but PAD, that's very concerning. That whole piece around transparency in government and accountability, we've got to change that space. I'm new. This is my first time running for public service. I was a public office. I was a political science major in college when I started 40 years ago, literally this semester at Howard University. So I always knew I wanted to go into it, but what I'm learning, people talk in circles and people talk in gray, and you don't get to an answer. I could have never lasted as a principal if I didn't give people a direct answer, right? So with that said, my concern around PAD is it sounded like exactly what we were looking for. Why did we change now? Why did we not go through our normal processes? All of that is extremely concerning and something that I would want to delve more into that. I will tell you, serving in that capacity, as in the capacity of a city council person, I would push for transparency. If there's a viable reason for it, I love it. let's share it, right? And then finally, the call center space. I'm very familiar with this because I'm running for public office. So people like that are doing unique things around the city or have ideas around the city, they engage us, right? Again, I told you I put neighborhoods first. If Adair Park, Mechanicsville, and Peoplestown are not for a project like this, that's going to really, really be huge in how I view it. Now, I will talk with legal, because I understand their concerns. It's a situation where they've only been zoned out of this space for the last 2 months or so. So it's new. I don't believe in reversing things unless there is a really, really good reason. And I would have to be really convinced that there's a really, really good reason. What I know right now is it sounds like a sound stance from City Council based on what the information that has been provided to council and provided to me, which I know is limited. So I hope I answered all
Thank you.
three.
Yeah, thank you. I know
Yeah.
I gave you an answer quickly. So, and so I'll let you at this point. Now, Nikki, thank you so much for joining us. I know it looks like you need to move into the place where you're going. So, and Ishay, and then I'll share all these questions in the chat via email, and then and you guys can, to the extent you'd like to, respond to anything in writing. So, Ishay, you can factor that in as well if you want to be brief. But thank you both for your time. Ishay, I'll pass to you the same kind of however you want to close out.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I'll make it fast. I'll make it fast. I am familiar with 24-0-15-6. I know that it's actually being, Councilman Winston introduced it in terms of the affordability piece, and I've been very vocal against the in lieu payment pieces, because what I do think it does not hold entities accountable that has made promises to us in terms of really helping us address our affordable housing issue that we know is a top issue for all of us. And so I do think that there is space and opportunity to explore what revisions like that should look like. I know that people, I know there's conversation of what that funding, if in lieu of those payments, where that funding can go. But I do think big corporations and developers are able to, if they can afford it, they're able to take advantage of that option. And so that is one that I think we definitely need to explore more. In terms of PAD, I'm really just disappointed in how things have transpired. I personally know the work that PAD has done in supporting our families on the school system side, and what we've had when we've had issues where it was necessary to refer families and adults, and adults to PAD. I hate to see where we are in this situation as a city. I do think this is one of ensuring transparency, also being accountable to the process that we have put in place, but also ensuring that we continue to strengthen trust and maintain trust with the community. One thing I do know, people question leadership when we constantly change the goal, when we constantly change the finish line, we constantly move the finish line. And it's not fair to us as a city, and it's not fair to the clients and customers and entities that we want to do service with. And so I do think in order to take care of people, we must take care of our business. And so I hope the city gets this resolved with PAD. It's an unfortunate situation that is happening, and I think all of us have questions about it. And it's, just a talk of what's really happening there. The data center piece, representing that area as well. A big piece when it was brought to me as a school board member was the community engagement piece, the environmental impact that this will have on the area, but more importantly, making sure we have true community voice at the table for this. I was shocked to see the extension that the exception that was embedded after Councilman Dozier and council, and council passed the restrictions, the restrictions being a certain distance from MARTA. And so I am this is also another space that I do think that it erodes community trust when we see some of these things that are happening. And so I've been very vocal about the environmental impact that the data center will have, the necessity of it being in this space. Does it benefit the community? But more importantly, the Adair Park, Mechanicsville, and Pittsburgh community has been very vocal about it. And so we cannot fall on deaf ears to the community that has to reside in this space. And I think it's important for us to stop making decisions at communities and truly start making decisions with community. So I'll stop there and I'll answer, with those questions, Chris, I'll probably send some more, some more details if people want to hear this evening.
Thank you so much. I know we ran you over, so you're now a little late to the other one. Please feel comfortable to blame us to that next group and say we made you.
No, not at all. Not at all.
Okay. Well, thank you so much for joining us and for your time and your willingness to answer questions. Because I know a couple others, including one who mentioned 911 wait times. It's something that you mentioned earlier. So in the chat. So thank you, and take care, and best of luck for the rest of the campaign.
Thank you all so much. Thank you for your time. Have a great evening and a great week. Thank you all.
And for everyone else, I'd like us to just stay on for a moment here at a minimum. Thank you. I want to say thanks to everybody who joined today. I've gotten the pleasure to know several of you, but not all of you, through volunteer work in this 2024 cycle. I've been in Atlanta for over 5 years now, and I've been involved in a variety of things, but I still have a lot to learn from many people on this call who I know are leaders in your neighborhoods. SAND leadership was present here. Obviously, Nathan and Paul have done a tremendous amount to get this group together. And so we want to spend a little bit of time. I'm going to ask one question while a bunch of you are still here. And then I know that things are going to come up. You got kids waiting for you and that sort of thing, or a partner that says, please get off the Zoom call now. Well, let's go. Because that happens to me. I'm going to share my screen for just a moment. And on the screen are some ideas that we've put together about what we might want this group to be. Overall, we wanted to have a group where we could discuss politics and get to know one another and build community in between elections, during elections, before and after elections, because what happens is with the major presidential cycle, I've been involved in many campaign cycles since I was in college in Obama's first term, and people disappear as soon as the election happens. And the idea of this group would be, how can we keep a group of people together that don't just help get people elected, but actually help hold people accountable and raise important issues like you all raised in the chat tonight. PAD certainly being one of them, zoning, etc. So I have up here, I'm going to drop these in the chat. And I would like for everyone, before you sign off, at a minimum, if you could just list the top two out of these ideas, what would be the two priorities that would most influence you to join future gatherings with this group of people or this kind of wider group of Southeast Atlanta Neighbors Take Action? So if you could drop those two in the chat. And then Nathan or Paul, would you like to share anything or give a little bit more context as people are dropping some of the ideas in the chat? And then we do want to really open the floor to conversation.
Well, every meeting I've ever been to, the most critical part is whether you're going to meet again. I would suggest that we try to have a monthly meeting. And so we would be open to ideas about what would be of interest in those meetings. My thought is that maybe the middle of December, maybe January the 19th or somewhere around, December 19th, we could have a meeting and maybe our legislators could come and talk to us about what we should expect from them in the next legislative session. I had some other ideas about connecting to the people that are going to run the Ossoff campaign. I'd like to know them. And if we hear any rumors about candidates running for governor, I'd like to have them on very early to talk to us so that maybe some of us can get involved in their campaigns. But so all of those things are sort of directed at being engaged with the legislators, engaged with our local officials. I think that probably we've just elected a new county commissioner, and I'd like to have her on shortly after her term begins to see what her plan is for her 4 years on the county commission, to see how we can continue to interact with her. So the idea is current elected officials, let's talk to them, let's find out what they're doing, find out what and maybe get them to listen to us a little bit on some issues that concern us. And the other thing is find out who may be running for office in the future, so that we can get in on their thinking before it's down to the last night before the election kind of thing.
And is it Nina? I remember it from the SAND meeting this week. Yeah, did I pronounce that right?
Yes, it is. Yes, thanks, Chris, for remembering.
Yeah.
I want to be sure this group does not become seen as a group that is meant to get involved directly with certain political campaigns as a group. I think if we do it as individuals, as a subgroup, that's one thing. But I think if we find ourselves looking more toward, as a whole, working on certain campaigns, we might have trouble getting people to come and talk to us. You know, they may not see us as a potential way to get votes or talk to us. So I'd just like to caution us from looking at it strictly as working on campaigns and more, I put in 2 and 3 from the list, and that's my only comment.
I might just respond to that since I'm sort of the one that's kind of pushed us to get involved in campaigns. I think that's a decision for us in the future. So when there's a campaign that's happening and we get some kind of consensus among the group that we want to get involved as a group, we should do that. I don't want it to be off the table, but it's certainly not on the table at the moment because we're facing city elections in a year, and I can't quite understand how we would. I don't think we probably would get involved directly as a group, although having the candidates on, a lot of us individually may get engaged in a campaign, like you said.
Yeah, I think one thing we talked about earlier too is, yeah, it would not necessarily be appropriate for us to be endorsing anybody or all collectively working for a campaign, but really just want to provide a venue or opportunity for people to meet other folks, and maybe a subset of this group wants to work for some candidate they're all passionate about. Or maybe people just more generally want to know what are the avenues or opportunities to engage. Because a lot of people, if you've not volunteered much or worked much on campaigns, it can be a little daunting to figure out that first step for how you engage with campaigns.
And that, I will say, that was one of the big successes of this group so far, is how many first-time volunteers we got out who knew they were going to be. The number one thing I've run into at doing lots of organizing work over the years is someone is timid or scared to go for the first time without knowing for sure who's going to be there with them. And what this group does is it says you always have somebody that you know and somebody you're going to recognize or see again that's going to go out there with you on your first time and getting involved. And I think that's something I feel really strongly about, is that the value of having this organized. I am curious, before we bring in others, Nina, if you're still there, would you distinguish, thinking about statewide candidates, like Democrats at statewide office, for example, or Senator Ossoff, for example, the presidential campaigns, would you distinguish local competitive races so we wouldn't endorse or kind of as a group collectively choose a candidate in a primary in a city council race or a city council election? Excuse me, not a primary. Or would you say just in general, we should not as a whole group say we work for this candidate?
I just think we should maybe have a little caution with that, Chris. Unless, I mean, I don't know that this group has any plans to do any filing on nonprofit or anything to raise funds. I agree with what you spoke about as far as people that have not volunteered before and being more comfortable with having a soulmate, so to speak, volunteering with them. I just think it's going to be, we're going to have a lot of campaigns coming up. And while this group may truly lean toward Democratic candidates, if we're talking about having other elected officials, and one of the things you put in your list had to do with reaching out to more conservative areas of the state, city, whatever. I just think we just need to be somewhat careful of that. I mean, that's just my comment. I'm not trying to, force anything down anyone's throat. I just think it's more cautionary than anything.
I appreciate your word of caution, but one of the things is we don't have plans. At least I would not have plans to be a 501c3. I think that's those are kind of the activities that belong in
No. There are other 503 things that you can file. You can't get politically involved if you're a 501c3.
Right.
So I wasn't speaking of that.
You can, but in a limited way.
Still, I wasn't speaking of that type.
Yeah. Mario Head, I saw you put your hand up. If you could unmute, Mario.
Okay, yes. Can you hear me now?
Yes, there you are. And then Mark, I saw you after Mario.
Great. Okay, great. First of all, thank you all for having me on. One of the questions that I would have and concerns would this group be dealing with and geared more toward things like holding elected officials, holding wannabe elected officials, and overall department heads and commissioners or whoever's over this department, public works and whatever, holding them accountable for the lack of what we're not getting in the city. And I know that's a long extended conversation, but just being able to just home in on making smarter decisions, with our taxpayer money. And I'm just, there's always a turnover with different department heads, this and this, and everything you've worked toward for the last 6 months as a community goes by the wayside. Now you got to start over. They're clearing calls saying this was done. And it's just enough is enough. And I think my part in really wanting to get involved is not just so much from the candidate side of it, but addressing the candidate side is basically making sure that you're there to kind of do what you say you're going to do. And from the officials side of it, should I say department heads, those types of things down at the city that run the city, there's just a lot that's just not functioning. And a lot of it is just the people that are in place and holding people accountable is the word.
Yeah, thanks, Mario. And if everybody should be able to see my screen. So I'm capturing everybody's thoughts. If I don't take what you're saying down correctly, just correct me, please, and make sure I record it in the notes kind of as you want it to be shared. So thank you, Mario. Mark?
Yeah. Chris and Paul and Nathan and others, thank you for getting this organized. Two things I was thinking about with trying for some stability and some next steps is one, working with the neighborhood associations in Southeast Atlanta. I'm the treasurer of the Organized Neighbors of Summerhill. And, so with that, one of the things I think that's helpful is working with the communication or social media people for whatever organizations and the associations in the neighborhoods. So that way they can promote these events. And it's like we're able to get down ONS's social media today. I shared it with our WhatsApp with the board over the weekend. And I think another component, someone wrote in the chat about DeKalb. I think it's probably good to think about exactly what is Southeast Atlanta and just having a good grasp of that. Maybe it's just everything that has the address that ends in SE is Southeast Atlanta. But thinking about that and working maybe with those neighbor associations, I would say that more than the NPUs. But I mean, that's maybe a whole nother conversation. But I think we're missing, or we have a potential to get a lot of active people engaged through those neighborhood associations by knowing when these are going to be and promoting it within those. So thanks again.
Mark, I appreciate you raising the question of defining it. I had sort of thought of I-20 and South and the connector on one side and perhaps East Atlanta and Moreland on the east side. But then there's a question of Cabbagetown and Reynoldstown, and maybe the boundary of Southeast Atlanta is DeKalb Avenue. We need to talk about that. But the one other thing I wanted to add was at some point we need a steering committee to guide this group so that and it needs to be a very diverse a steering group, maybe of 8 or 9 people. And you might think about whether or not you would want to be on that. But we still need to be a very diverse group so that we're reaching out into all the different neighborhoods.
And I think Mark's idea of getting to know neighborhood organizations and having a running kind of roster of who we reach out to is a really good first start to trying to build bridges and making sure that we are thinking about every neighborhood. And that's certainly something I think that a lot of people in the group want to figure out is how do we make sure that it's not just 3 or 4 neighborhoods that are dominating the conversations, but we are being inclusive all the way to the kind of boundary of Southeast Atlanta. Rachel, saw your hand up, and then Marguerite.
Hi, all. I just had, a quick comment. I have, at different stages of my time in the neighborhood, have been more involved with sand or like less involved, just depending on life and those things. But one of the things I find valuable is when I participate in these things and am able to connect with sort of the experts in the field. I think some of these topics that we're talking about, even tonight, that the Nikki and Ishay were talking about, even for me, sometimes it's so hard to be informed about like the realities. And so I was just going to suggest that, I think when we have the opportunity as a group to, maybe convene some subject matter experts on occasion to better understand some of the issues that we're facing, I think, or however, helping to connect people with information, because there's a lot of information, and yet it's oddly not very specific sometimes, And the other thing I'll just say is, I work at a nonprofit in the community that serves the community. And I often wonder if residents are aware of like some of the community resources that are available and how these issues are impacting the ability to serve residents in this communities. And I just, as we're continuing to talk about the purpose of this group, I just hope we'll consider getting more feedback from the community in general and beyond just the people that are normally active. Sometimes it might be engaging communities, or it might be, I don't know. But really what I'm just trying to express is that I hope that we will find ways to really help people have better information about the things that are happening. Because I think often that's just not, it doesn't happen the way we think it does.
That's a great point. There's experts we can try to reach out to and have those conversations. I mean, things like affordable housing and zoning are very complicated. And I mean, there's also probably nonprofits where I don't fully understand all the good work they do, and having those opportunities, I think, would be amazing.
Yeah.
I should probably put in a plug here for people writing about issues, factual kind of discussions in the Porch Press. So I've always wanted us to have more public discussion there, and oftentimes that fails because we don't have the writers to do it. So anyway, think about it.
There you go, Rachel. You can write a story about your nonprofit for the Porch Press.
Yep.
Okay.
I'd read it.
Yeah, thank you, Rachel. I've added in a few places that I think the Facebook group, because one of these questions too is there's a purpose of this group and why we get together and why we meet. And, I know people use Facebook in a variety of different ways at this point, but I do think there's a lot of gaps sometimes in our ability to communicate in neighborhood groups about issues that touch on the political. And so the idea of expanding not just elected officials, but thinking about experts and people who might have a really clear position, but can also tell the story of why they have that position really effectively would be something I hope people would share. We want the Facebook page to be small d democratic, right? And loose moderation, but people sharing ideas and information about talks coming up, or if a nonprofit has an event that has some sort of information. We want it to be a connector, I think, for sure. Marguerite, I think I'm saying your name right. You're muted still, sorry. You're still muted. Let's see.
Yeah,
I'm
we
going to
can't hear you, Marguerite.
I'm going to ask to unmute.
Okay, I got unmuted.
There you are.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, awesome. So I know that education, it probably isn't necessarily what needs to be the top priority here, but every time there's a school board election or a redistricting plan, it will be something that will be coming up a lot. When neighbors start fighting and decide they hate each other, it's usually over a difference opinion about redistricting. So I think we can't completely ignore it because it will come up. And I think we need to figure out a way as a community we can get in front of any of these redistricting battles and have calm conversations, because the pros and the cons are usually very poorly informed, very emotional, coming to the opinion very last minute, driven by fears of housing prices and things like that. And yet we all know that there's huge inequities in education around race, income, and disability in the city. And we obviously have to address poverty. We have to address housing. We have to address transportation and these other issues to do it. But we cannot ignore this, because our votes, how we vote for school board, how we handle redistricting has a huge impact. And additionally, we also have to get a little more educated about disability, because as we look at how we want things funded within APS, which a lot of our tax dollars go to, there's a limit on how much things we can cut, because we're nowhere near meeting federal law on special ed. We finally are in a great place because we have a new superintendent with a master's degree in special ed. the board's mostly on board with this, with these issues, but it is the norm, not the exception, for federal law to be violated around IEPs, for kids not to be getting what they needed, for like little or no accountability on their progress. And so it's an all hands on deck issue to solve these problems. So we can't solve these problems why everybody's also reacting to fires everywhere, because everybody's so angry about a redistricting. So this is where we can come together and build community and build calm and productive conversations about it, I think.
That's a great point. And thank you for, because that obviously didn't come up a lot in the conversation tonight, but I think that would be, it should be something that's important in the conversation. I've just, FYI, I taught for 12 years at Midtown High School when it was Grady, and then Midtown was the last place where I taught, and I watched the redistricting fight play out in real time. And I know it's been really significant in the Maynard-Jackson cluster as well. And so I love that you brought that up. And also it could be a way, because I think something that when we left this a little ambiguous about this idea of outreach, like community outreach and support, that I really like your idea of this is a space where we should be able to be ahead of things enough to where there's enough relationship that we can take risks in conversation and talk about difficult things before it's the exploding, hear from parents meeting. And like this, and so just as an example is that Paul, I don't know if Jimmy's still on the call here, but just in the 2024 cycle, the campaign was sending people to very specific places all over the city. Paul and Jimmy Hardy decided that they're going to go door to door in Trestle Tree housing and talking to voters and people that aren't always being engaged by campaigns. And I know that there's some connections to knowing some people in leadership there, and it's thinking about like, how can we make sure that city services are working for all the people in our neighborhoods, and that education has to be a part of that, and it's a top concern. So thank you very much for sharing. Others? And I'd be interested, Paul mentioned leadership and this idea. I think this came about because I think Paul got a bunch of people in the room at the Harris campaign office and said, how can we create something a little more organized? I think we've combined Nathan's vast experience in the city and running for office, my experience as a field organizer in campaigns and running a lot of supporting a lot of student organizations, trying to do civic work in the communities. But we by no means are trying to run this ship. Like this is, and we want this to be small d democratic. And I know that sometimes that comes with a trade-off of like, what can we actually get done? How efficient can we be? But the idea of having a steering committee or some sort of group that meets a little bit more often to think about the kind of questions we want to ask to candidates, that meets a little bit more often to say, do we want to have a meeting for that? Or should we prioritize waiting for another time? Like, do we want to engage in some sort of, other experimental ideas that we hadn't talked about before? Like, we want more people posting on the Facebook page, initiating ideas, etc. This is only going to work if we have more than 3 people that are kind of posting and making decisions and encouraging people to show up to stuff. So we I'd love to hear any ideas you all have about ways people might get more involved, ways we can distribute leadership.
Yeah, one of the things that prompts me to want to stay engaged in this effort is the fact that our neighborhoods are 90% Democratic. So when it comes down to campaigns, you can think of that. And that was true now, and it was true in 2020. And we gave Democrats a substantial lead in every one of the last major elections. My concern a little bit is to make sure that we keep a focus on that, and we try to find out why it is that some of the newer people have not joined in this effort. Because if you look carefully at the numbers, we probably didn't increase our vote in our core precincts in NPUW, at least, beyond what we did in 2020. And that raises the issue of all the people living in apartments around us. I'd be interested in people that have some discussion about how we engage the people living in all these now high-rise apartments around us, how we engage them in a political discussion, because we tend to be, residential, single family type of folks, and we seem to ignore all those people that are not ignore, but we don't know any of those people living in all those apartments around us. And that's more and more going to affect the future of our elections.
Well, I don't see anyone else with their hands raised. Now we have a few people dropping off. Chris, you have an idea for the best way for people to reach out? They want to get involved and be like on the steering committee or providing more input?
Yeah. So I think at this point, I'll send a follow-up email that just like I guess everyone, because we have a recording for this now as well. So once I get a link for that, I'll send up a follow-up, and then I'll ask in that email for anyone to reply with interest about something they might want to take on, or at least kind of be a part of the next a steering committee meeting, if you will. And just be informal about it too. Many of you have my email or cell phone number at this point, or Nathan, certainly, or Paul's. So I just keep the conversations going.
Chris.
Yes.
Hey, this is Nan, Nan Orrock, and I've been involved in the kind of the concept evolving to what to build and how to build it and where to start. And I think in the next stage, delineating what's the difference between what is the need being filled by building this network. There's a vigorous MP, and I'm not trying to answer these questions, but anybody, the great unwashed would say, well, we've got an MPU that meets and has committees and does these things. And we all live in neighborhoods that have neighborhood organizations. So maybe trying to address, or to clarify what special place this group would fit into that's not being done by other groups. And what's the need for it?
Dan, you and I have talked about this a number of times, and I guess my response to that is we don't have a place where we talk politics, because the neighborhood association is a 501c3. You can't really talk politics in terms of who gets to make kind of decisions in the NPU. Because that's a city, so we don't really have much of a space where we can have political discussion. So that's
what I'm saying is that's part of understanding this framework and figuring out how we want to go forward, is understanding what's the empty space that needs filling. What was the need to convene people, and just in terms of as you move forward, having that clarity, with the steering committee. So whatever next steps take on.
Well, I agree.
Formalizing this morning. That's all I'm saying is that framework is going to be, the question is going to be asked over and over.
Yeah, that's great. I highlighted, not sure if you can see it on my screen, but I bolded and highlighted that question. I think that is the right question for the next meeting. And then anybody that replies, yes, I'm interested in getting involved a little bit more, we should have a very clear, direct answer to that question. And that gets repeated over and over again as we invite people to things like this, that like, this is why this organization exists. I think I love the frame.
And I know that it was lifted up to a certain degree after this very successful Benteen Park Day, for the Benteen Festival. Yeah, that they do annually. And so we put together the wherewithal to have a booth, and my gosh, the people that volunteered for it and the people that came up and were tickled to death to see us and wanted to talk and wanted to be plugged into the democratic energy around the elections that were coming up. And didn't you get 75 people signing up with our?
We had, it wasn't that many, but we had, I think it was closer to 40 people, but that was a day though, I'll be honest, like that was a day where we got a different demographic of people. We got a lot of younger people, more recently moved to Atlanta, looking for ways to get involved. And I think that really aligns nicely with like how are we going to meet people and get to know people living in apartment complexes. We need to go to the things where they're showing up, and I think that was an example of meeting kind of a wide variety of people. And frankly, it was cool too because I got to know a pastor that lives, or sorry, that is a pastor of a church that's there in Benteen, right up the street from me in Boulevard Heights. And like those kind of connections are going to be hard for us to reach without just being a presence at. We should be a presence at festivals. I think that's something I'm glad we got that written down in these notes as well.
And we did it with collaboration with the Fulton County Democratic Party. You know that, and Paul, I think you said 75 yard signs got picked up there by people. So I just think that demonstrates the thirst that's out there and the potential. And that's why I wanted to lift it up, that we just got I thought a remarkable engagement opportunity that day.
Yeah, we actually had a couple of volunteers. Sorry, go ahead. Yeah.
I was just going to give a thank you to Nan for serving as a sponsor of the festival and helping fund the booth space that we got.
Oh, sure. Absolutely. I'm happy to do it. It was great. And people actually got it put up on the Mobilize
yeah, that's what I was going to say.
And we had a woman come up from Fairburn, Georgia.
Fairburn, yes. There's somebody from Fairburn, somebody from Midtown.
Yeah.
I think that is a good question too to consider of kind of what a possible relationship with the Fulton County party might be. I think a lot of us have probably read a few takes since the election day about what's going on with the Democratic Party, and I do think we have the opportunity to boost the local nature of it, and like how can we have continuity between all these campaigns so that it's not always the most stressful election that's ever happened and trying to throw everything together at the last minute, and trying to figure out how we are more intentional, which kind of gets to Marguerite's point as well, is that like we have the benefit of time, like we can have foresight to get the conversation started way before it's too late to really have a wide, diverse group of stakeholders engaging.
Yeah,
So
our
I think,
our relationship with the Fulton Democratic Party is something we need to work on. It's something they need to work on also to figure out how a group like this can have a direct relationship with the Fulton Party.
Yeah, so there's a lot of nuts and bolts kinds of conversation that folks that love to do that steering committee thing can really help move along. And that won't be everybody, but it could be, it's the place to massage this stuff. And also when people introduce themselves and speak or chat, we don't know where they live. Mario Head is in Polar Rock and heads up the neighborhood organization there, for example, and is in NPU-Z. But having our faces up on the screen, it'd be a good addition for when you talk, kind of say who you are,
And
I'm at the meeting norms of sharing kind of what neighborhood you're representing or what neighborhood you're coming from.
Yeah.
Nan, you raise a good point about the borders between the neighborhood organization and this organization. And obviously one is that we're much more focused on the politics of the community. But at the same time, there are issues that get raised by the neighborhood organization that maybe we can be connected to as well. So I don't think it is of one or the other. There has to be some great communications back and forth between the neighborhood organizations and somebody that's organized mainly around politics.
Yeah, we had people on this call, a good attendance, but we're down to half of that now, but there were people on this call that are leaders in neighborhood organizations, are active in them, in the neighborhood groups in the NPU, and that's a good thing.
Yeah, and I think a lot of people got the word out in a way that I'm really grateful for, and that we had close to 40, I think, in total unique people that joined at some point.
Yeah.
So Paul, I'm gonna work with you to pull the attendee list, and then we also, Nan, something's really exciting for everybody here to know too, is because of the relationship we built with the Harris campaign, one of the field organizers gave us the emails of everyone who showed up to volunteer that lives in the 5th, the 1st, or the 12th, kind of in the precincts, in those city council districts with the precincts that would probably fit Southeast Atlanta. And there's just no way you get that level of trust with the campaign and people in the office if you don't have some sense of regularity and a little bit of a brand, like something more than just one person who's trying to do something. And so that's been a real early success and a win for us is that we've now got a wider list. I did send that out to this. I'm not sure how many people came today that came from that, but I had several people reply in an email that they would like to be put on future emails like this, even if they weren't able to join today. So I think there is a lot of hope for growing this. And then every campaign cycle, you build that email list, and it's not just the annoying ones you get from a mayor in Arizona that's running for 2 years later, but it's really people that you want to get to know in your neighborhoods.
Right. Well, and a core of y'all have really put in an incredible amount of sweat equity to, get us to where we are in this conversation, and interviewed the school board candidates in the runoff. And so I just kudos to those who have really just been relentlessly volunteering. It's spending your time. Wouldn't be.
And Nan, you're an inspiration to all of us to see you down there campaigning, just like we were, going out knocking on doors and showing up at the campaign office. And I will forever remember that. I think one of the things we haven't done very well, Henry Bryant was on from East Atlanta, but for some reason our communication didn't go as well with East Atlanta. And a lot of that is because they were in the DeKalb County presidential race. And so there was a boundary issue there that we need to overcome, because we do need to have them part of our effort here, since they're connected through the Porch Press.
Yep.
And connected through our city council people.
Yep. And
I think it's a good note to end on. I will send a follow-up email by kind of tomorrow evening, just thanking everyone, getting the recording out, etc. And please stay engaged. Keep the conversation going in email, Facebook, in person, text message. I'm excited about what's possible for this group. Thanks for everyone for coming.
Yay. Thank you.
Thanks, Chris, for emceeing, and Nathan for taking over the questioning.
Nathan's questions were fantastic. Yeah, well done, Nathan. Yeah.
All right. I know at least one of those came from you, Chris, and thanks, Paul, for nailing down the candidates and getting them committed that come on a good time and a good date. I know that takes a lot of work to wrangle folks together, so thank you, Paul.
Oh, and I see Mario's still on the call too. I'm not looking at the whole thing, but I just saw his name move up to the, I guess as people drop off, but hey, Mario.
Yeah. Okay, good night, everybody.
Have a good one.
Thanks so much.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
I'm gonna send you. I was gonna send you a direct message. I'd love to get together, talk education, because I care a lot about the way we do redistricting. I have really strong feelings about what happened in Midtown, and a group of Centennial charter kids. I was on the Go team, and the way the district rolled out, that they were just gonna chop the area that was most low income out of the Midtown cluster and push them into Washington. It really brought kind of me awareness about how these things can happen and how we get the system that we currently have. And so
cold-blooded.
Yeah, I couldn't believe it. I was in shock at the meeting. I said, are you really dropping that at the end of the meeting, like in the appendix, that you're just going to cut these kids out? I taught the gen ed government classes. I had several students in every class that was going to be affected by that, or their younger siblings were. And anyway, so.
Yeah. And this is kind of just like, this is like actually part of how, regardless of how you feel about it, this is actually how Shivy is in his school board seat now. Is he was at one of the redistricting meetings when The people who planned, so the people who made these plans had never walked the neighborhood. So this is also like, there's so many things that were done politically wrong that don't have the community engagement to help them do it right, where they were going to have kids walk over train tracks to go from Balmo into the Carver cluster. And they thought that they could go on the Beltline, but that piece was under construction indefinitely. So there's just so many things that are done wrong where we could push something through that could be really good, but we don't do the front end work. Some of the people that say they love Balmo, you know, if we try to bring Pop-Tech kids into Balmo, don't want to put their kids in, and they cite test scores. They've never set foot in there. So we're not doing a lot of the work we need to do to just get people in the door, have people look at schools, get people comfortable, get people even educated on what it is to go into a school and how that would affect you. You know, like, my kids went to Balmo and they've had really good test scores and really good grades. It did not negatively affect them, but that's something that's the education on that hasn't really been done well. And, you know, we haven't really done the good groundwork on special ed either. And that's something that really needs to happen, because that's where we can really bring people together. Across the district, special ed kids are having the same problems: rich neighborhoods, poor neighborhoods, white neighborhoods, Black neighborhoods. And so we have so many, we have opportunities where we actually can also talk to all these different factions that normally don't agree on anything. So there's just so many missed opportunities we haven't taken advantage of yet.
So one of the responses I have, I mentioned different elected official kind of groups that we should get together and ask them what they're doing. And the school board members are part of that. So we have 2 district school board members. We have a member that's in East Atlanta and one here. And I think we have at large. Do we have at large school board members now? Or
Yes.
not?
Yeah, there are.
So a meeting that comes together and manages put together and ask them about different policy directions that they're going on, so that they get some neighborhood community. So I think what happens to school board members, they raise a little bit of money, they send out a bunch of mailers, and somehow miraculously they get elected. And then 4 years later, they come back, and then they fix it so we only vote for half of them each election cycle. So I don't think we even have a school board member. Our district member is not even up for re-election this time. So that was a strange kind of thing that took away a lot of accountability.
There's a good argument for that, Paul. I'm dumping, I mean, you know, having massive turnover all at one time.
Yeah.
You lose institutional knowledge.
Yeah, sorry, to Nan's point, she's really right. The problem, the reason I'm so active now is we finally have some institutional knowledge of some good people on special ed. We finally have a superintendent with a master's degree in special ed. This is the area in which we violate federal law the most. And the thing is, yes, it's normal around the country to violate federal law around special ed kids, but it shouldn't be. And we're paying for it in our jails.
Exactly.
Like, it's just like the amount of people from little jails all the way to death row, overrepresented on mental illness, overrepresented low IQ, overrepresented special ed. And
80% of people in prison don't have a high school degree.
So
yeah, and also look at the racial divisions on special ed in Atlanta. Now, it looks mostly Black and mostly low income. The numbers aren't really quite like that. What it is that everybody that's even middle class, if they can jump ship, they jump ship. And this is the case in most school districts. And it's because it's freaking exhausting to have to pull together all these extra services because you can't get what you need from the school. It's a whole full-time job to constantly email and call when you're at school without good services. And I'm only in the point to know my rights because I got spoiled because Robin Christian at Barack and Michelle Obama is just amazing. But it's unusual. And so I can only educate parents because I got spoiled at a place that cared about doing it right.
So an issue related to that is the resources the school system has to do these kind of things. And what is still just completely floors me is the fact that commercial property in this city is assessed at 50% of its actual value.
Yeah.
So you actually fix that problem. And most of that is failure to collect tax on that commercial property to support our school system. The school systems are the ones that have the biggest losers on the commercial assessment issue.
Yeah.
So, we got to do something about that.
Marguerite, I would if you have an interest, I'm saying your name correctly?
Marguerite.
Yeah,
Margaret? Okay, if you have, I think your level of passion on this, and are you in the leadership of the group that you put in the chat and you posted in the Facebook group about
Yeah.
integrated schools?
Yeah, I'm an admin for Integrated Schools Atlanta chapter, and I'm also an admin for Atlanta APS Special Ed Families.
Okay.
And they do have some other stakeholders. They're trying to keep that mostly families, but Integrated Schools is really for everybody because we're talking about the integration of race, income, disability, gender issues, all of these things, and it's a citywide group. So my hope is that we can just really advocate and get up front of any hot button issues, because the more we're fighting tooth and nail over little redistricting things, the more we're not addressing big things. Like people that have concerns about athletics have big concerns, people that have big concerns about special ed have big concerns, but people rise and fall on these issues that should be petty but become giant.
Well, the other thing is that we're living in a state where they're systematically sucking the marrow out of the bones of public education. They just passed this awful private school voucher, and the version of it that Arizona passed is practically bankrupting their schools out there.
Yeah, but one thing I will tell you about this is why I don't ever shut up about special ed, not just because like I've staked in it, but part of why I don't is the thing is one of the reasons it's popular across party lines, like Democrats and Republicans will write into their state reps wanting this privatization sometimes. And one of the reasons I feel like that happens is because of like the systemic special ed failures. People get desperate. And it's not like they think private or charter is always better. They're just desperate for something. Like we're supposed to be zone king. My daughter was supposed to be put in a special ed placement in Howard. I always said, I will eat my hat before I will go charter. I've got you at Kendesi right now. And the reason is like, she would have been in an autism classroom instead of inclusion when she didn't really need to be because she just couldn't handle the big environment. And they wanted me to go to my special ed person for literally everything. They didn't want to engage with me on how she would get to other classes. They didn't want to engage with me on how she could have a good relationship with like the assistant principals and things that aren't the special ed person. They just thought you should have to go to solve every single one of your problems to the special ed person. So I am somebody that every like 4 of our school board members current and 2 past know how much I'm in favor of traditional schools and how I have an ethical issue with charters. Because I don't believe that whether a child gets a chance is like, do you get the luck of the draw? Like that disgusts me. And yet I've got 2 in charter because I was that desperate.
Of course.
And, well, and like, what is that? Why should that be that way? And, and it's still not full inclusion because my daughter can't do French. She can't do orchestra. She can't do a lot of the things that the kids in the bigger traditional school can do because they wouldn't guarantee me a way for her emotionally sensitive child that has issues with loud noises to just get down the hallway safely. They wouldn't promise me a para, like these basic things.
Well, but the other hideous irony is that people seek out the private school voucher path, fighting to get the best that they can for their child. And the big irony is private schools can boot that kid right back into public school system, take the money, keep the money, and reject the child.
They don't legally, and the thing is they don't legally have to meet certain goals. Now, just because we're not meeting the goals in APS doesn't mean we don't have like an obligation to. Like the thing is, as long as I'm in APS, even with the charter, I have rights. So if I fight hard enough, I can get my rights met. It's just that what we find is so many people are just beaten down and exhausted because it's hard.
Right.
Yeah, and so what we need to do is make them feel less defeated, less exhausted, feel like their rights are enforceable. And if they feel like their rights, like that our policies in APS are enforceable, special education handbook of rights is enforceable, that everybody in the administration at your schools has to care about your child being okay. Like my stepdaughter at the previous school she was at King, when they were grilling me about personal information I didn't want to give, I finally gave them something that should have triggered mandatory reporting about a real concern. What I was told by their assistant principal, well, she seems fine to me.
Yeah, well,
Like, you know, that really puts a bad taste in the mouth.
well, I know, and I mean, there's only 4 of us left on this call right now, so I just now noticed that.
Yeah.
Preaching to the choir, I guess.
There were several people on the call that have had a lifetime in education. I mean, Chris, your considerable background, but the Bolster family is another example. I mean, Ricky taught at Grady High for probably 35 years. At any rate, I think that expertise and that perspective can be, brought to this group. It comes into the category of people, of sharing information that people need to hear and can act on or not, or can connect more directly with the group or whatever path that way it takes. There's a thirst out there for, and we heard it tonight, for experts and subject matter content.
Margaret, yeah, my question was going to be whether you feel like you have, to what extent you have capacity. This organization is not going to become taxing on anyone who steps up in this organization. I don't think we're building a structure that's designed to be super demanding. We're building something that is ready and it can pounce when the issue comes up or when we need the person or there to come to the meeting or whatever it is. And do you have a capacity to join some conversations about the direction or to kind of be in a group chat of some sort or that sort of thing? Like, because I think your voice on education, it would be something that would be really meaningful.
Yeah, sure. Like, I'm not definitely in a position to give like 10 hours or more a week to anything, but
right.
The occasional.
Not outside of you.
Yeah, and I didn't really have time to, get a sitter each time for the NPU because I have to have kids with homework and things like that. But I can definitely jump in occasionally to this sort of thing. Just because I find that if I don't do it here, I'm just doing it to the wind and to anybody that will put up with me anyway.
Yeah.
Right. So this is a group where you'd have inquiring minds want to know.
But I think we can get people to show up to meetings and events that your other organizations you're involved in. I think I want us to be a conduit to got a lot of people that care about a lot of things, but we just don't always know what's out there to get involved in. And so I have a neighbor, for example, who wasn't able to come tonight, who has a son who's autistic and is really struggling at navigating, and she's feeling really alone right now. So I'm actually going to reach out to her and see if maybe I could connect her with you. But like that's my hope for this, is that we can, it's a lonely world out there if we're trying to fight all these things by ourselves. And so
I have a neighbor like that, Chris, as well.
Yeah.
Not even a block away from me, who is desperate to have the guidance and look for resources and figure out how to get for her autistic daughter what she needs.
Yeah, and so this is kind of why I'm trying to get people on APS Special Ed Families, and I can also refer them. Decatur has had a group that has like almost 2,000 members. So and it's because a lot of them are actually Atlanta and Cobb and other areas that didn't have groups, and so they just came from the whole metro area. But they're able to resource a lot of things too. So I send them to Decatur, but I also send them to APS Special Ed Families because we're trying to grow that. A couple of our board members are on there and they see what happens. So they also
APS Special Needs. Say that again.
APS Special Ed Families.
Okay.
And also anybody can contact me and I can refer them, and I'm an admin on it. And so I don't have all the answers, but some of the people have the answers. And then we can also, board members see it. And I'm hoping as we grow the group, more people will see it. I'm conducting a couple of meetings with different board members over the next few months. I'm trying to get all of them between our group and board members in little small group settings with Evites, so I can control it to 10 people per board member. And a lot of these parents that don't usually get heard can get heard.
So what's your phone number, Marguerite?
678-887-0528.
Okay. All right.
And I'm not affiliated with any particular nonprofit in education, mainly because I want to play nicely with literally anybody that comes into APS. And I don't care for the attack ads that run during cycles around school board. Some of them have been the nastiest fights, and I'm going to work with them. If I think they're the devil themselves, but like I can get a meeting, I'll talk to them.
I love it. I think it's a great approach to have power. You got to be able to do that. So
Yeah,
I hear.
this is how I wiggled my way into a meeting between me, four special ed moms I know, and the superintendent.
Well,
So-
Marguerite, I helped. I was knocking doors for Ken Zeff, like weekend after weekend in the fall last year, and I taught his daughter, and so he's new to the board. So if you need an introduction there, he would be interested in meeting with you.
Yeah, because he only knows from me feeling slightly ornery about my middle school situation and not from any other context. So yeah, I might need that introduction because I want him to feel like it's really worth his time to meet with my group. Because what I'm trying to do is build coalitions so we're productive going forward. So we're not constantly at every engagement session hearing the same complaints over and over again, because we have heard some of these people in these smaller settings.
Yeah. Okay, I've got to ring off.
Yeah, same here, Marguerite. I just texted you. Can you just make sure that I got your info?
Okay, just a second.
And how did you find out about this group? Because you've been in it for a little while now.
The Benteen Festival.
Oh, see, Nan, look at that. Look at what you did. This is really, so this is what I'm talking about. Like, we got to get outside of these immediate networks we already have in our neighborhoods, and that's affirming of that. Did you get my text message?
Yeah, I did.
Okay, excellent.
Where do you live? What neighborhood are you in, Marguerite?
I'm Ormwood. I'm Woodland Avenue. I used to live I'm right down the street from Carla Smith, who I hope still lives here. I haven't seen her out much.
Yeah, she still lives here. Yeah.
Okay, yeah, I need to give her a call sometime. She, when I was a new neighbor, figuring out how things work in the city, figuring out expectations, figuring out how to get heard, I learned so much from her.
You enjoyed hour-long conversations on a regular basis, right?
Yeah.
There you go.
Yeah, but I mean, I just learned so much, and I learned the value of also talking to someone who will give it to me straight, even when it's not what I want to hear.
Yeah.
Exactly. All right.
Yeah.
All right.
You guys take care, all right? Good night.
Okay, great. Thanks.
So much.
Bye.
Yeah, bye-bye.